How you doing? Master Sergeant Young, 732nd AMS. So, uh, in regards to making the changes within our unit, stepping up and leading those changes for our people, uh, my specific concern is that all AFSCs are not created equal when it comes to diversity. Just there's a natural inclination for some demographics to trend towards certain AFSCs. Uh, I mean, one example could be that medical usually has more females. Uh, and in my particular AFSC as an aircraft maintainer, the majority demographic, white males, are more dominant. So for someone like me to come in and attempt to make a change in diversity areas, it's a little bit tougher because I'm having to get the majority to see that there's an issue that is not present for them because there's so few diverse people having any issues where they would see, oh, this person really having a tough time or they're not being treated right, I should step in. So what advice would you have for someone who's in a career field like mine where there's less diversity and attempting to get the majority demographic to be part of the change?
So I'll take this one first. So look, so going back a couple assignments ago, I was operations superintendent, and I was I was operations superintendent of a squadron. It was a training squadron. We had about 110 defenders and other AFSC support that was embedded in us. But I was one of two minorities of that unit, and I'm the head guy, right? So it goes back to what I was saying. I could tell, and I knew it was subcultures going into this assignment. And I'm going to talk to you from a leadership perspective when it's inverse versus what I believe you're talking about. You're lower on the totem pole, but you're trying to get in where you fit in, right? So I'm going to tell you both ways, right? So it goes back to what I was talking earlier about the set the table, right? So I knew that they were like, hey, who's this guy, right? But again, you have to be courageous. You really do. I mean, and again, you got to remember that this is a business that is supposed to be inclusive, and that again it goes to a lot of point what Chief OG was talking about. This is an inclusive institution. The United States military is. I mean, we can go back in history, right? So you got to know what right looks like and what your reality is, right? And you got to try to force the two together. So for me, I now being the leader of a bunch of folks that weren't used to following people that look like me, I had to get pretty busy in my assignment off the rip, okay? And I did it. And I knew there was going to be challenges going into that. And I was like, you know what? I got to set the table because I had that master sergeant that told me, hey, you got to set the table. And luckily I had previous assignments that kind of showed me how that master sergeant forced a multicultural flight to kind of work and operate like Voltron. I know Voltron doesn't resonate probably with this crowd, but you guys know, for those that are out there know what Voltron is. You have to be able to come together to slay those monsters out there, right? So in your situation where you're one of a community that there's more of, in this case you said white males and black males, you just have to, you have to put yourself in situations with the leadership all the way down that one, hey sir, I detect there's an issue here. You have to be courageous. You have to call it what you see it. And a lot of times I think that we take for granted that the leadership is in on it. And that's not always the case. Believe it or not, your leadership doesn't have the grand crystal ball, eye in the sky understanding or perspective that we think they should have. I think that's a misnomer to assume that as well. You can't think that, oh man, I think the leadership's in on it. No. What the leadership's probably waiting for is someone to tell them that, something ain't right. So that's where you, Master Sergeant Young, I think would come into a situation like that, would say, hey, one thing I cannot stand, is I'm, again, getting closer to the twilight of my career, is when the bosses give the opportunity for for the airmen to, and everybody thinks it's the obligatory, oh, you know, what do you guys have to, you know, anybody got any questions? And then everything is, everybody's just, you know, how long they can hold their breath until the boss gets you off the hook. No, as a senior NCO in this room, you should always have a question. Make one up if you didn't have one before you asked it. And if you got those type of concerns with regards to diversity and inclusion, you got a bunch of potential airmen, I think that was a little bit of, to your question too, that you have other airmen that potentially are suffering in silence because then they themselves don't feel like they have a say, especially if the senior NCO, in this case, a black senior NCO doesn't feel like he belongs, then they're not gonna feel like they belong. So then it's more on the onus of you to say something, because you gotta fix it. So every time you rank up, you have to be more courageous. Not more quiet, not more cooperative, more courageous. So I think that's where it starts, because those are units, when you guys do PCS, and this is my 13th assignment, I think as you start getting around the Air Force more, and you start running into different, you know, demographic type of flights, units, etc., you're gonna pick a little bit more, we say, you know, pick up more tools, put in your rucksack, but you're gonna be picking up more tools to put in your repertoire of how to handle these situations, because they're gonna be more. But you got to be courageous, and you got to say what is going on to the right people who are intelligent enough to make sure they can get to the changes and hopefully get to some of those problem sets that you're having, if you're having problem sets in those type of environments that you described.
What I believe the Air Force's deliberate focus on diversity and inclusion, right, deliberate inquiry has started to uncover is what the ground truth is in organizations, what the ground truth is in how we build Air Force bases, and what kind of barbers are we bringing in, and who are we hiring, and are we even supporting a diverse population on our installation, or are we just in such habitual practices in what we do that we're not even thinking about it, because the folks who set that up when the Air Force was established, right, that were in the room, there wasn't diversity in the room. And so that's what I think is starting to happen, is there now is a voice, there's a platform for that, and now is the time to kind of target of opportunity, continue to push that narrative and address those things. But what you have to do is you have to understand and be able to present what are the tangible things, right? What are the things within the organization that don't have and don't represent the entire population, or are inherently and or even unconsciously biased against a portion of the population? Because I think it's very obvious now. You know, 20 years ago, I was told, you don't belong here. We were only a few years into women being allowed into security forces, and I had the same Vietnam era leaders, and I had security forces members who flat out said to me, you shouldn't be here. I don't think the female should be doing this job. You have no place here. I want nothing to do with you. Get out of my face. Right? So I think that we're past that obvious degree of discrimination. There might be pockets of it, but I think by now we have a much more educated force in that, hey, that's a hard line. We have zero tolerance for that, and this is something that I'm going to take up the chain, take to the commander, or if there's not command level action, I'm going to take out to the IG, or I'm going to take the EO for action. I think now we're talking more nuanced awareness. Almost like when the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, there's some folks who look to be old enough in the room to remember when we went through that as a force. There were folks who had never thought outside of their own world experience and just worldview, right, their life, to realize that we had folks serving amongst us who were part of an LGBT community, who couldn't be themselves ever when they put the uniform on. Couldn't talk about their life, couldn't talk about the people that they love, couldn't talk about their family, and had to pretend to be something that they weren't for their entire career under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And it took real talk to help folks understand, hold on, this is folks you serve with right now, and the existence that they live is such that they can't even be honest with you with who they are and who they love because of a rule that's been in place that was archaic, and we have grown out of that and recognized it, right? And we're moving forward as a force. And so that's why I think I understand that we also have to act. It can't just be conversation, but I believe that the spoken word and bringing things into the light of day through those examples and talking about those things is what can help shine that, because it's a balance of being a force of nature and a force to be reckoned with, and also offering some grace so that we can help people learn together and we can move forward. Because if we're just a force of nature and we just break it and we just write people off who didn't understand it or made this decision or were perceived to have supported a thing, we're gonna move forward fractured, and we're gonna move forward not capable of what we need to be, frankly, to win wars and protect our nation. Right? So I believe that there's a balance of being that force of nature, finding like-minded folks who are ready for that kind of fight, right? And that courage, I think, is the perfect word. But we also have to balance that with offering ourselves and those around us some grace so that we can move forward from a newfound understanding and mutual respect.
Say, to finish up, and I know the other chiefs wanted to hit this as well, is, you know, so back in 2015, I had the awesome opportunity to be one of the first units and be the chief of the first unit that had a LGBTQ member in it. And this was
that was out.
that was out. Yeah, that was out, and to the point to where when they came out, they were scared, absolutely frightened. If anyone can remember back, 2014, 2015, because that wasn't something that was commonplace, right? And so when they came out, it was it was like a schism sent throughout the unit because everyone, again, immediately took sides, right? So what would have happened had someone not set the table? No telling, right? But that's not what we did. We did set the table. And we didn't hold a staff meeting and say, hey guys, this is how we need to operate. No, that's not how that was gonna go down. Not successfully. No. The commander and I went out through the flights and everything, and we start holding get-togethers. This is back when everyone was doing breakfasts, lunches, and this, that, and the other, and we had said member be a part of all that. We didn't, and we made sure everybody was inclusive. It was almost like a commander's call each and every day for the next 60 days. Now again, that was forcing the issue, and some people will say, well, that's kind of forcing it. But we look at the end product. The byproduct is member was able to thrive in that environment, in that unit, during that time with all the scrutiny, the Air Force times going off and everything else, to the point to where the member said thanks to the unit and the commander and the team that they felt like they belonged. They felt like they were not slighted with job opportunities. They were, absolutely all in during that particular time. And we didn't have that back then. It was right before everybody was like anticipating the handbook. For those that remembers all that, we were doing that because of this, because of what was in here, doing the right thing at the right time, in the right moment, for people, despite what they were or what their ideologies were. Again, you have to look at things from a humanistic standpoint when you are a leader, when you're a person really, but a leader, because people are going to follow a leader. But if there's no leadership and it's absent, then what you now need to brace yourself is for all the silliness that's going to quickly follow and fill that vacuum and fill that hole. Okay, so that's the other thing. To your point, coming from that side of the house, thank you for mentioning that, because that's where you guys are facing also. We can talk about the racial piece, but you can look. It's everything. Again, this is a team effort, and no one should be feeling like they're not part of a team in your unit, no matter what, and especially when you're wearing this. Okay.
So, Sergeant Young, I'll chime in real quick. Again, I'll take it from a different perspective. So as an Air Force recruiter, right, that you are, right? We're all recruiters, right? If you're waiting for the Air Force to solve this diversity issue within your AFSC, you're going to be retired before we have a meeting to talk about it, all right? So don't wait for the Air Force to come up with a policy or come up with a working group to address it. I don't wait for the Air Force to do anything. What I do is I go out and do, within my own rank, as a chief master in the Air Force, what can I do? And I'll make sure I elevate that up the chain. Like, okay, you know what? I'm thinking about this great idea. Here's a talking paper, or here's my speech. Think about this. You know what? Go forward, right? Chief Omni and I, we do this all the time. I get a good idea, I pitch it to him, and I just, hey, run it up the chain and let's see what we can do to address it. This is an institutional problem, right? It's not just Air Force, right? You can talk about elected officials in Congress, and you can talk about the disparity there when it comes to diversity, whether it's male to female or, you know, color of your skin, right? You can talk about that. Again, how do you address it? If people don't vote, guess what? You're gonna keep electing the same people, right? But we're not gonna talk politics here. But as a recruiter, I'll ask you, when was the last time you walked into an high school and talked to people about your AFSC? And say, you know what? Come join us. If you see there's an issue, right? There's an issue of diversity within my AFSC. Every time in the conference room, I'm the only black guy in here, and there's like 10 white folks. Well, to me, I can tell you like, well, so what's the problem? I don't see any problem with that, right? I'm just saying that, you know, put that to the side. I don't see a problem with it. You talk about diversity of thoughts. If we are thinking alike, and I don't necessarily disagree with what that colored person is saying, okay, we're all on the same page. The question is, what do you value? Do you value how you look versus the mission set? We get the mission done every single day. We get A+, right? We get outstanding. We get outstanding every single time we do an inspection. We get the planes out on time. What's the problem? But if I do value, you know what? I want to see more people that look like me. Then again, I look in the mirror and say, okay, you know what am I going to do to address this? I'm going to go to my local recruiter's office, and I'm going to see what I can do to recruit more black folks into my AFSC. So I know at least, say, you know what, I've done my part. I've done my part. As a Master Sergeant in the United States Air Force, I've done my part to get more diversity into my AFSC because it is what I care about. Some people are absolutely fine being the only colored person within their AFSC because, again, what they value is, you know what, when I walk in the room, they know I'm in the room, and they respect me. They don't care what I look like, but when I speak, they know I've done my homework. And everybody can't wait for Sergeant Young to speak because they know you always come prepared and you always come ready. So I also take it from that perspective, all right? So I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, so speaking of perspective, so I'll give you the white airman perspective, right? So sometimes I've had these conversations with my work center too, right? When these conversations came up, it's like, hey, who do you want to hear these things from, right? Do you think a black airman should lead these conversations, right? And half were like, yeah, I think so. And then half were like, no, I think the white leader needs to start these conversations and have them, right? And everybody was kind of divided on who even started the conversations, right? So, and I'm from a career field, like you were saying, I work in medical, right? And in my career field, the enlisted side, the minorities, for enlisted, minorities are the majority in my career field. So our senior leadership everywhere across the board, minorities in general are the majority of my entire career field, which is awesome, right? And we're like, hey, look at us, like we do things the right way, right? And we just had a diversity inclusion panel last week with our entire career field, all got online, and we have a problem with diversity and discrimination. And it's like, holy S word, you know what I mean? Like, how in the world, like I thought we were doing so much better, and people think the same thing about the Air Force, right? Like, we are way better than most corporations and companies out there on the outside, right? But do we still have a problem? Like, absolutely, right? So my thing, again, you helped create a lot of the curriculum, right? You helped come over and create some of these diversity inclusion curriculum that we're teaching, right? And the thing that I saw most within these forums was when you got a white airman, capital A, any rank, usually small A airman, you got a white airman that was passionate about the conversation, the entire conversation was better, right? It wasn't a black airman that was speaking up because usually that's scary to white people, right? We had this whole conversation too about like, man, white people don't want to go to that stuff because it's a white bashing conversation, right? And I'm like, all right, I get that. So our best way to do it, and the best forms that I've seen, is when the white airmen like spoke up and gave their perspective on things, and then everybody just started talking, right? And it was actually value added compared to some of the other things where you're just talking and you're just spinning wheels and stuff like that, right? So I know there's people probably inside your unit that are passionate about this, not only the people that look like you, but other people as well. And then on the other side, like, white people are not all the same, black people are not all the same. Like, if you're a white person from Iowa and you're a white person from Alabama, we don't really get along, right? I mean, Roll Tide or whatever, you know, all that stuff, you know. I don't even know if Iowa has a football team, right? But it's different, right? Everybody's different. So the conversation doesn't have to be about like white and black or Asian, Hispanic, Latino, whatever. It can be like, you can find stuff out about people of the same color, right? We had a guy from Nigeria, senior airman, in one of our groups, and I remember, like, it meant so much to me when he brought up a story that he had about when he came from Nigeria in high school, right? And, you know, he migrated to his other black friends, right? That was the majority of his friends. And there's some white guys making fun of him about eating watermelon, right? And he's like, his other black friends are like, are you not gonna get him for that? And he's like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't get it. Like, what? I don't know, I eat watermelon, yeah, it's delicious. Like, what's the problem here, right? He did not understand it, right? And because he's from Nigeria, he's like, I don't even like other countries around Nigeria. Like, we don't get along, you know what I mean? But it's different, it's that macro culture thing. There's a way where we're all on the same team when we're wearing this uniform and fighting, dropping bombs. And then you start breaking down the micro cultures when we get out of the uniform, and we start to see more problems the more micro we get, right, with that stuff. And then the last thing, again, sorry I plugged this stuff so much, but one thing that we did within the Total Force Leadership Development team is we would get calls sometimes from like flight chiefs. So example, we got a call from a flight chief, and he's like, hey man, my flight commander is just not emotionally intelligent at all. So what are the chances you guys could come out, have some of your best instructors come out and teach emotional intelligence to our entire flight, but you're gonna kind of focus it towards leadership, and hopefully this one person gets it, but they're not gonna know we're there for them, type thing, right? And that's always something you can do too, right? Like, hey, we're gonna have this thing, it's for everybody, but the curriculum is going to be based around whatever maybe you need to change in your environment, right? So I know you're part of the team, right? Those things have helped us in not telling people what we're doing, but still trying to make an impact. And sometimes it's the outside perspective, like, my people are tired of hearing me talk, right? I need to bring you in, somebody in to talk to my people, because sometimes it's the opposite, right? Informally, yeah, we should all be talking about this just every single day. That's my job with my own people, but outside perspective is nice sometimes too, right? So I don't know, just some other things too, if people are like you that, you know, don't have diversity within your work centers. Hopefully there's other things that you guys can kind of push forward and get the ball rolling, you know? But yeah, anyway, that's what I got.
Are we
All right, so
getting-
we got another question coming up.
Oh, yeah, keep it going. Yeah.
All right, just want to make sure we're getting paid for this. So that's